The ninth Brackeys Game Jam is here, with the theme, The End is a New Beginning. Oh boy, what am I gonna do? Is the feeling I usually get when the theme for any game jam is announced. But I'll figure something out. What if you played as a necromancer, resurrecting minions to fight for you? Yeah, I can definitely do this in 1 week. Mic check. Hey everyone, I'm Adam, and it's time for a game jam. But I have a job now, like a productive member of society. At first I thought I wouldn't have the time to take part in the jam, but then I thought, maybe I do have a couple of hours every night after work. So, this will kind of be an experiment to see how this works out. Also, as you could already see, I'm making a 3D game this time. Finally. Been wanting to do that for a while, and it's been quite a while since I last worked in 3D. So, jumping into it, what I usually do when working in 3D is draw a sketch to use for modeling, because making art for your 3D game is definitely the highest priority. So I made the model and rigged it with some struggles along the way. Evidently I must have gotten kind of rusty at this stuff. On day 2 I worked on some player movement. No fancy momentum stuff, just some simple velocity movement. I also downloaded the texture from ambientcg.com to put on the ground. This isn't the style I intend to have for the game, but it's just a placeholder. On day 3, I made some attack animations and then had hell of a time trying to import them to Unity. Trying to Google, I eventually found the answer, and that reminded me, I went through this same experience the last time I was working in 3D. Had to find the text file in the Unity folders and change the bake animations variable to true. On day 4, I procrastinated for 6 hours, apparently. On day 5, I went to sleep early. By this point I definitely must have been realizing there was no way I would have an actual game by the end of this jam. So, day 7. At first I tried making a weapon trail using the trail component, but then I decided to make it using Unity's particle system instead. Then I made an enemy that you can slap. And I decided that instead of submitting this thing that doesn't even count as a game to the jam, I'm just gonna keep working on it for another week. Or 2. By the way, in the past when making melee combat, I would put a trigger on the weapon and enable it during the attack animation. Then, when it touches the enemy, it would deal damage. This method is more realistic, but sometimes the weapon can pass through the target without registering the touch, especially if you have low frame rate. For this project, I went with another method. During the attack animation, I just do a sphere cast in front of the player and apply damage to the targets in range. This is less realistic or precise, but it doesn't have the previously mentioned issue. On day 11, I drew a sketch for a human enemy, modeled and rigged it. On day 13, I made animations for the enemy, and by the way, doing this reminded me that making 3D animations really is a lot of fun. I also made a ragdoll with Unity's ragdoll maker. I guess normally you would enable all the ragdoll parts when the enemy died, but that kinda sounds like a lot of hassle. So instead I just instantiate the ragdoll on enemy death. Look, it's not janky at all! On day 14 I was thinking about making AI for the enemy, but instead as procrastination, I just made a pose menu, some weapons, and armor. I was drawing some fiery particles when Unity gave me a scare by telling me my lonely SSD has less than 1 GB of space, but it's okay, nothing broke. So after that, I made a fireball with Unity's particle system, and I coded a fireball spell for the player. On day 15, I made some basic enemy AI. I used Unity's Navmare stuff for pathfinding, and I moved the character along the generated path with my own rigid body movement code. On day 16, I made some attack animations for the enemy, and I renamed the armature for Clarity. I imported the stuff to Unity, and then everything broke. Enemies aren't dying, the animations broke.
20 minutes later.
So I fixed that, and evidently the issue must have been caused by the armature being renamed or something. I also tried adding the sword to the enemy ragdolls and... Oh yeah, I also added a health bar to the player so that the enemies can kill you. And a mana bar for the spells. On day 21 I added post-processing so I can have some nice glowing materials, and I made the enemies drop these glowing orbs on that so that you can regain health and mana. And I fiddled around trying to make the orbs fly to the player when he gets close to them. Also made some makeshift walls around the map so as to stop the orbs from flying off into the abyss. On day 28 I made a bloody screen overlay that flashes when the player is taking damage. Except it's kinda weird because the player has skeleton hands, implying he's a skeleton. He really shouldn't have blood in the first place. A fact I seem to have forgotten at this point, but I guess that's how it is for now. Anyhow, I kinda struggled with the resolution of this blood overlay, but I guess eventually setting the canvas to match width fixed it. I tried to write some big brain if statements to automatically lerp the highlights when the HP or mana is going down, and lerp the bars themselves when the HP or mana is going up. But it didn't really work, so in the end I just made it so that we can manually decide whether we're lerping the highlights or the bars themselves by setting the lerp highlight parameter of the start updating bar function. I also made some effects for these orbs. I wanted these particles to always point upward, even if their parent object is rolling around. I got this one line of code that does that. Don't remember where I found it, either a Unity answers or ChatGPT told me, but it's surprisingly simple. I forgot you can just modify the transform.up parameter. By the way, I just occasionally chat with ChatGPT. I definitely don't intend to outsource all my work to AI. On day 30, I made some smoke effects that pop up when you don't have enough mana for your spell. I looked into my sound effects folder to see if I have some sounds I could use, but evidently I didn't. So I went and recorded my own sounds with my mouth. And hey, finally getting some use out of this mic I got. Now I felt motivated, so I continued pretending that I know anything about sound design and made an explosion sound. I've done this before, it's easy. Just record some claps, slow them down, let them get low pitched, but maybe not too low, I don't know. Layer them on top of each other and there you go. Unfortunately, I don't have any work in progress moments to show because OBS doesn't wanna record the audio from Reaper, but boom, it just works. Oh yeah, and then I implemented these sounds to the game, along with some magic-y fire sounds. On day 32, I didn't do anything. Guess I was looking for some magic orb absorbing SFX in my folders, but I didn't find anything good. On day 34, I made a scuffed main menu. I thought about calling the game Army of the Dead, but that's apparently a movie's title, so I called it Army of Death instead. I also made a pause menu, I think, at some point, maybe a lot earlier. But instead of setting the timescale to 0 to pause the game, that causes issues if you use Lintwin for UI animations and stuff, I just made it so that the enemy AI stops doing things while the game is paused. On day 36 I drew some skeleton sketches, you know, for NPC summons. Yeah, anatomy. Man, don't let my art teacher see this shit. On day 38 I modeled the skeleton. I tried looking up some skeleton models online for reference, but this is all stylized anyway, so no need to worry too much about anatomy. I tried importing some animations from the Human Enemy Blender file. Didn't know if it would work, but it kinda did. Is this what the kids call a JoJo pose? On day 40, I tried to do some UV unwrapping and texturing. It's pretty simple, I mean, most of the skeleton is just white anyway. It's only the face and the teeth that require some work. So after that, I imported the skeleton to Unity. I implemented a system to switch between multiple spells. I drew spell icons and I made a summoning animation. I also made some visual effects following Dightly's VFX tutorials. Turned out pretty sick if I do say so myself. Also tried to add a glowing pentagram using Unity's particle system, but it kept changing size depending on how close you were to it. So in the end I just turned the pentagram into a sprite prefab and put a script on it to make it spin. On day 42, I made the summoning spell actually summon skeletons out of enemy corpses. Also made a jump animation to make the summoning pop better. On day 47, I fiddled a bit with blood particles and looked up how you can make low poly terrains in Unity. It seems like the steps are: make your terrain in Unity, export it, import it to Blender, make it low poly, export it, and import it back to Unity. That seems like a big pain in the ass. But I also found out you can change the height map resolution in Unity, and that does seem to make the terrain kinda low poly. Either way, none of this matters yet. We're not gonna be dealing with terrains for quite a bit. I tried making the skeleton model use the enemies, animations and AI for testing shenanigans, and the animations turned out looking surprisingly good, unlike earlier when I tried to do this in Blender. But now that it's handled by Unity's animator component, it looks fine. Anyway, on day 48 I chopped my skeleton and human model into pieces. So now, when we kill this skeleton test enemy, it falls to pieces. And I use the human pieces to blow the corpses to bits when using the summoning spell. Hold on. So, after fixing that, we can now blow the corpses up. I do have to wonder, does this mean my game needs a content warning now? Anyhow, after 48 days, we can finally summon minions. That was kinda supposed to be the whole point of the game, although they don't have AI yet. But it's about time we wrapped up this devlog. If I try to show everything in this video, we'd be here for an insanely long time, and that would make me go insane. So, thanks for watching. Another devlog will be coming soon. Until then, see you next time.